The last speaker of this session before we go to the panel discussion is Professor Jen Rupp. She's a recent acquaintance of ours here at the Corporate Relations. She was recently hired to MIT and brought with her a host of very exciting research on people even. And I believe I've given you 12 minutes to talk about solid energy innovation.
Thank you so much, Trond. Thank you. So, good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. So I will talk actually in the next 12 minutes, Trond, yes, about actually solid-state batteries and also about how we can use a part of the lithium technology also to create other devices in solid state. So in general, the motivation, I think, is quite clear. So you can either actually create a cheap and better mass energy storage to, for instance, store renewables or other sources of energy. And the other part I want to highlight during the talk is that you can also use a part of the battery innovation to create actually good track system to monitor, for instance, also for our society, carbon dioxide exhaust or other things that we want to make aware of. So you can also educate your consumers. There's two ways, I think, that you can act in this energy arena. And here's the outline of the talk. So I will talk in the first part about large-scale solid-state battery systems, and in particular about lithium garnet structures. Then I will talk about microbatteries and how we can make glassy-type film structures that are very conductive for such devices. And then I will come to a new type of a device, which is a carbon dioxide sensor based on lithium solid-state electrolyte structures that we will use there. And finally, I will close down just with an outlook showing you a new type of device to power implants. So the general motivation, as we have heard that morning, is actually to go into solid-state batteries because you can significantly increase the safety. So in a solid-state battery, you would replace a classic liquid-type lithium electrolyte that you would have in with a polymer by a solid-state ceramic compound where the lithium is structurally encaptured. And you can actually use that ability to have actually open designs even of batteries that won't inflame anymore in air. So we all know those pictures that we have seen in the morning, that this is definitely a safety concern. The other aspect that is of interest here is that you can enlarge the thermal operation window to go strongly above 120 degrees C. And you can, for instance, create systems where you can use co-synergetically also waste heat from other products that you have. And you can reuse that to increase, for instance, the charging time. So there is a strong driving force to make whole battery assemblies that would be solid state. Now, one material class that has been coming up actually in the last 6-7 years is actually so-called lithium garnets. So I just have here a short academic plot for you where I plot actually the current solid-state electrolytes out of ceramics. And we can see here actually all the different materials that has been tested. And among them, currently among the highest conductivities, you find so-called lithium lanthanum garnet structures. We can see on the left side a small picture on how that looks like as a microstructure. So it's a ceramic. It's a little bit like your coffee mug in the morning, yeah? We have a ceramic coffee mug that you hold in your hand, but you have to imagine that fully stuffed with lithium, and that is actually what we bring back to the batteries. So I think major advantages here is actually the enlarged temperature operation window, and also that you can, in some extent, also use, for instance, electrodes where you don't have necessarily to use pure lithium, and you can also start to form or avoid actually the formation of lithium dendrites, which is often a place for failure in lithium-ion, lithium air, and lithium sulfide batteries. So what has been done on these lithium garnet batteries? So where's currently the challenge if this is among the highest conductive electrolytes to compose actually such solid-state batteries? So one challenge is very simple. If I just plot here on the right side a careful literature analysis, then apart from lithium, where obviously we have again some safety concerns if we directly use this, there's not one single anode that was published until last year that would actually be on an oxide that has been composed to a full ceramic battery cell. Also, if we look in the cathodes, then actually some of the materials are still very limited. So that means that actually the ceramic processing has still to go a very far way to integrate actually alternative anodes to make open geometries and actually profit from the ability of these lithium ceramic structures. And to find actually good low-temperature ceramic processing techniques is of essence, and also to suggest here new materials. So what we have done actually in my group by some members is actually, first of all, to make some lithium garnet particles and to use a process where we can coat these particles after we have made them in a nitrate social process, for instance, with gallium and other elements that we use like as a diffusing counterpart to go into the structure in an annealing process, and thereby actually stabilize this lithium garnet structures at about 200 to 300 degrees Celsius lowered annealing and sintering temperature than conventionally used in their processing. Well, why is that important? That is very important because later when you assemble the battery cell and you bring in, for instance, an electrode, then many of the different oxide anodes or other cathode materials are simply limited in making good bonds with this electrolyte as, to go actually to lower temperatures of about 900 or 1000 degrees Celsius. And this is one of the first assembly strategies here in the field for that material that we can use to create the electrolyte at a lowered sintering temperature to make the ceramics to come to such full assemblies. And we can see here how that looks like. So this is now a lithium garnet ceramic electrolyte structure that is stable already at 950 degrees C, sintered to ceramics, and where we can start now to compose on top of that various electrodes that I will show you in the next slide. So here's two examples. So we can use, for instance, this vehicle, and we can kind of like make two types of cells where we use now, for instance, lithium titanium anodes. And we can create either a sharp interface or also like coagulating interfaces where we make like porous structures and we suck in the electrode on the other side, and we can co-sinter them to stable structures already at 900, 1000 degrees Celsius. And that's quite important later in costs, as that brings down your cost in the ceramic processing of these whole cells. And this has also a strong implication on the performance. To just show you just in a little slide, so it depends very much how you sinter the interface in these ceramics, because if you have the dense, sharp structure, we can see that the battery performance actually is rather low in the cycling, and the moment we make this coagulating structures of those two dense electrode solid-state lithium garnet interface, we can see that we can ramp up the performance. Now still, of course, there's a way to go to come even to higher performances. And so actually with that lesson learned, we can also actually start to compose solid-state battery cells with such an electrolyte, and on top of it take a softer material like antimony and compose antimony nanocrystals on top. And here we come actually to very high, relatively high lithium garnet performances of the cells of about 230 milliamps hour per gram, which gives you a perspective actually on using this solid-state and safe batteries as an alternative. Now, why is that important if we reflect that for a moment to liquid cells? And I promise you this is the most academic slide of my talk. So I've plotted here actually in orange this lithium garnet antimony cell, and just focus on the orange line, right? And all the other lines, we have tested different liquid type battery electrolytes that are around that we compare to this lithium garnet solid-state ceramic battery cells. And what we can see is actually that stability-wise, over the number of cycles, actually the lithium garnet ceramic cells over-exceeds all the other examples that we show here. So it's very high in the cycle number. It gives you stable cycling stability. And I think within the lithium garnets for a full ceramic composed solid-state batteries cell, this is among the highest values so far published actually in this arena. So we're just about to publish those data. This gives you some perspective for large-scale storage that you can make safe batteries actually, reduced costs at lower temperatures in ceramic processing, and also that you can get very stable performances, which is interesting in the long run when compared to other liquid-based systems. So where is it going next? Actually on the solid-state large-scale storage. So we have shown to you we can make this open solid-state battery arrangements here. And what we are looking right now is actually further improving the power performances, integrating higher voltage cathodes, also understanding more actually the stability at the electrolyte interface, and finding ceramic concepts to synthesize actually these cells at low temperatures to further reduce costs and making very strong bonds in the cells. Now I come to the next part, which is actually micro battery architectures and glassy type novel kind of like structures therein to be integrated in the cells. In general, there's a driving force also going away from this large-scale storage to looking a little bit in the smaller arena to replace supercapacitors by microbattery architectures. And I plotted here in the Rigoni plots the power density over the energy density, and we can see that there's a perspective for solid-state microbatteries to replace actually certain supercapacitors. Now, what is out in the field is right now systems which are kind of like semi-hybrid, like from Jennifer Lewis's cell in Harvard, where they printed electrodes and they suck in actually a liquid as an electrolyte. So it's kind of like a semi-hybrid liquid solid cell. And then there's also some solid-state microbattery films. The problem with the latter is that currently actually the energy density could further be improved, and therefore we are also looking in integrating actually other types of lithium garnets and other materials into such cells and making whole thin film ceramic cells. So when we look now in the arena on what is out there actually on lithium garnet crystalline electrolyte films, then it's very shocking to engineer something here because you find a 4 order of magnitude scatter in the conductivity. Therefore, we have actually done a model experiment where we composed kind of like microbattery lithium garnet thin-film structures, and we investigated how the processing temperature can affect the conduction here. And the take-home message from this slide is pretty simple. So you can choose different thin-film processing temperature, for instance, in a pulse laser deposition system. And if you go to very low temperatures, you come to a very amorphous, glassy type lithium garnet structure. So this is currently unpublished. And what a lot of people don't know is actually that you can create the whole arena from these amorphous structures to the fully crystalline structures that you would normally find actually in classic batteries. What is interesting here is that we found, actually describing a bit further the lattice, that it's always kind of like in a lithium garnet near order, even if you're amorphous, and you just start to crystallize. And when you do that and you arrange on a periodic long-range order, you come to the classic crystalline structure like in a large-scale battery. Now, what was very exciting for us is that we could see that the fastest conduction, and that's now I think the bad news, is actually not in the fully crystalline structures. It's really when you're in this glassy, amorphous, thin-film lithium garnet near-order structures. And you can use that actually to make a low deposition temperature cell where you actually have as a compositional point actually the thin films that are glassy that have fast conduction. So what is quite interesting here is that you can create lithium garnet structures with a near order, being glassy type, staying at low temperature and processing for the whole microbattery assembly. And that is right now where we are at, where we compose whole microbatteries based on these glassy types in films, processing that as very low temperatures, room temperature to 300 degrees Celsius, directly on a chip like you can see here on the left side. Okay, let me just give me one more minute and show you what else can you use lithium electrolytes for other products. So we've seen before we use those in batteries, and I think that's quite obvious what is for the room. But it may be also of excitement what else as devices can you also compose those of. So another aspect is we want to track, for instance, carbon dioxide to give a feedback to consumers, for instance, on how they are, for instance, in their carbon dioxide consumption and especially to industry. And what is currently out is actually different products where you have actually razor bulky type carbon dioxide sensors that are working on materials like lithium, mazicorn, and others. It's electrochemical sensors. However, these are very bad to integrate and also require quite high temperature to be operated. What you can use is you can use the battery technology and not create a classic battery cell, but for instance, refunctionalize the electrodes that you have a sensing electrode reacting, for instance, on carbon dioxide, and the other one being a reference electrode, for instance, like gold. And you can measure an electrochemical potential that you can use to track carbon dioxide other species. So in other words, you can use an electrolyte and create completely different functions than a battery just by putting other electrodes on top. Isn't that beautiful? So that really works. And what I show you here is actually a device where we have done the IP on. It's actually a lithium garnet-based sensor where we use the battery electrolyte. We just replace other electrodes, and we have a different device functionality to track CO2. Right, and last slide, and then I'm done. Just as a glimpse, what else can you do? I just want to show you one last invention out of my labs that I'm very excited about. And that is, let's think once out for a minute. What do we have in a human body when we power, for instance, implants? Currently, we have very Stone Age old technology, and it really hopes that I never have to use that and get that as an implant to power different types. But it's very obvious where the human people are going. So we want to implant more and more chips with functionalities to measure all kinds of things. And Trond, I think
there's a plan to my madness, Jen.
I know. I'm just done in a minute.
My madness is, this is a new MIT professor.
Yeah.
There's an endless. You would not believe how amazed we were when we had more than 12 minutes to listen to all of this. I actually don't want her to finish because I want to prove a point here. This is the beginning of a transformational journey. This is such fascinating stuff. Mm-hmm. It requires booking meetings with her. We have plenty of them this afternoon. This doesn't get done in 10 minutes. You're trying to do the impossible. I'm not going to let you do it because I want you to come back.
Well, I think with those words, there's nothing more to say except that thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I really appreciate to be here. Thank you very much, Ron. Yes.